When there's an injustice against you or someone you love or someone you believe in, stand up. Don't sit down on them, if they need you.
Welcome to Popcorn Planet's Diddygate coverage. I am Andy Signore. We're live for another day, and I'm here. Wait, she was supposed to be here. There she is. It's Kim is here. What's
Hello.
Up, Kim? I don't know why
I'm not ready for this. I don't think any of us are ready for this.
It's Ashley Parnham is the plaintiff. Okay.
Yeah. KK is the Christina, I believe.
Yeah,
exactly.
Christina Coram,
Yes.
Shane Pierce, and then some John Does, Jane Does, and then Sean Diddy Combs. KK is an employee, his right-hand woman. Defendant Diddy's predatory behavior was constant and well known by several individuals, including Defendant Diddy's employees, staff, friends, family, and associates. Plaintiff met defendant Shane, this is the woman, the accuser, met defendant Shane in February 2018 after an altercation with another man at a bar, and defendant Shane came to plaintiff's rescue. While outside the bar with friends and other patrons, defendant Shane FaceTime video called defendant Diddy and was showing people defendant Diddy in the video on his phone, attempting to impress the people with his famous friend. So interesting if that's provable to people at the bar. Defendant Shane then showed plaintiff Diddy on his video call, which plaintiff ignored, stating she was not impressed by him, knowing defender Diddy because she believed defendant Diddy had something to do with the murder of rapper Tupac Shakur. Visible in the FaceTime call was Diddy and some of his children, including sons Christian and Quincy. It appeared from plaintiff's perspective, Diddy was having a get-together at his home during the time of the FaceTime call with Shane. Why would he take a FaceTime call while his family's there with some random girl at a bar? I gotta say, if this wasn't Diddy, that would be red flag number one, but we'll see if there's witnesses to explain that. Defendant Diddy heard plaintiff's statement and made a remark that plaintiff would pay for her statement regarding Tupac and overall dismissal of Diddy. On March 23rd, defendant Shane invited plaintiff over to his home to assist him with his cancer medications because he stated he was weak and unable to open his medications. So just to recap so far, Shane's at a bar with this woman. To impress her, allegedly, he called FaceTimes Diddy. She's not impressed. She doesn't like Diddy. Good for her. But then Diddy is on the phone with his kids, and then plaintiff, or I guess, it says, "You killed Tupac." Diddy got pissed and said, "You will pay for that." Fast forward, Shane then invites the woman over to his home to assist with his cancer meds. She arrives. Shane informs plaintiff that he wanted to give her a ride in his new car. Plaintiff and defendant Shane leave his residence for a brief period and then return. Shane left the door. Once they returned, defendant Shane left the door to his apartment partially open and stated that the door was ajar because there was an issue with the door where it couldn't close completely. Shane was renting an apartment on the lower floor of a home in Orinda, California. Shane had a separate entrance into his residence that led to the backyard of the home. The home also had a main entrance on Loma Vista. Defendant Shane rented the home with a woman who lived in the upstairs portion of the home, had 2 dogs who resided with her. Plaintiff and Shane then began to watch a movie. Defendant Shane offered her a glass of water, which she retrieved and brought back to plaintiff. Approximately 10 minutes after plaintiff and defendant returned from the drive, defendant Diddy enters Shane's residence. Diddy entered the home in a grand, ready-to-party manner. His grandiose entrance was so loud that the dogs upstairs began barking. Diddy did not enter the home through the backyard entrance, but instead through the main entrance. Along with defendant Diddy were his bodyguard, defendant Doe 1, a woman who plaintiff later identified as defendant KK, another small skinny build, early 30s with blonde mid-length hair, who plaintiff has still been unable to identify. Jane Doe, defendant Doe 2, upon information and belief, is a friend of defendants Shane and Diddy, and defendant Diddy's driver, Doe 3, who remained outside in his vehicle during the duration of the assault. Plaintiff believes Shane invited her over to set her up to be assaulted by Diddy because of the statement she made about Diddy a month prior. Upon Diddy's arrival, he immediately began to antagonize the plaintiff, stating that she thought she would never see him in person and pay for her statements about Tupac during the video call that defendant Diddy caught plaintiff. Plaintiff was in shock as she never believed that she would ever see or meet defendant Diddy in real life, let alone in the small apartment rented by Shane. Diddy then began advancing towards where plaintiff was sitting on defendant's bed with a knife and held it right to the right side of plaintiff's face, threatened to give her a Glasgow smile like the Joker, guys, in retaliation for her previous statements on the video call. Defendant KK told Diddy that she did not think giving a Glasgow smile would be advantageous to her potential clients who they could sell Plaintiff to for sex. So they're alleging now, right out the gate, this is extreme, right? And again, if this is real, it's horrific. The level
Absolutely
of sort
terrible.
of control and sort of, he's now just shown up to a random house where God knows who else could be there or above or nearby. This is extreme. So extreme that I'm a little hesitant already. Like, what? Defendant KK then makes a threat saying, yeah, well, don't do that because then we can't sell her off and traffic her. Assuming she has no one. How? Okay, but extreme. Defendant KK then made a threat to Plaintiff that they could ship her off anywhere in the world and that she would never see her family or anyone she knew ever again. Defendant Shame then partially undressed Plaintiff. Diddy removed the remainder of Plaintiff's clothing, removing the knife from her face, and then retrieving a bottle of liquid from a large fanny pack. Diddy then, they mentioned a fanny pack that KK, I think, carried that around in a previous lawsuit, if I remember. Do you remember that, Kim?
That sounds familiar. It sounds familiar.
I think so again, I just keep in mind, Kim and audience, how many other mentions in this are things that we've seen in other lawsuits? Because that's a tendency you got to keep in mind. Yes, that makes it sound like it's the same as the others, but it's also a way to make it seem like the others. You know what I'm saying? So that's just something to keep in mind as we're going through it. I'm not saying I don't believe this. I'm just saying this is a lot. And now the specific of a fanny pack mentioned in here feels like a callback to like, see, we also saw a fanny pack is part of my worry. And I can handle a couple of those, but this has a lot of those throughout, which just gives me pause. Because again, even though I don't like Diddy, even though I think he's a monster, there are going to be people who pile on. And again, part of the reason I'm also skeptical is this lawyer, and we'll get there in a second. But okay, just calling things out as I see them. You guys give me your thoughts and feelings as we go in the comments too. We'll come back. Diddy then squirts a bottle of liquid on Plaintiff, which placed her in fear that she was being squirted with a chemical substance like acid. Plaintiff soon realizes the substance was an oil lubricant. Plaintiff was squirted with this liquid substance over the entirety of her body. KK was then told by defendant to insert what looked like a syringe from a sterile packaging into Plaintiff's privates. Defendant KK did as told, and Diddy then told Diddy that she was unable to use the IUD because it had prematurely been released from its packaging. So I guess an IUD is to sort of stop pregnancy, correct?
Yeah, and I'm wondering, maybe that's what they nicknamed it. I don't know, but it looks like there was something they were trying to insert to keep there. So that's what it sounds like to me. But
ugh. Again, because there has yet to be an allegation where there's a gang of people, including this KK individual. Correct, Kim? This is the first time I've seen the whole crew there partaking in it. There's been other men
that I can remember. And this is the problem. This is civil lawsuit number 19 against Diddy. 19. And I sometimes you get to a point where it's like there's so much information, it's hard to be able to separate in my brain. Like, have we seen this all together before? I think you're right, Andy, but it's like I can't say it with complete certainty because there's so much. There's so much.
Correct. And I guess I gotta apologize. I gotta be more sensitive because it's like exactly. There's so many of these, and I'm grossly becoming desensitized to this a bit too. Is also what's strange because it's the same story over and over again. So please don't. I'm not trying to seem insensitive. I'm attempting to look at this objectively, and I know for some of you that's going to be hard. So warning again, trigger warning. I'll try to be better in my commentary here because again, I got to look at this. This isn't like this isn't factual, guys. This is a lawsuit. It's a civil lawsuit that could not be true. It could also be true. That's part of what we're doing here. So let's try to look at this as objectively as possible. It's easy to believe given what we know and feel about Diddy, but let's keep going. Diddy, so the IUD couldn't be used. Diddy, upset by this, took the syringe from KK and tried inserting it himself into her privates. KK and Diddy began to argue as defendant KK continued to advise Diddy that since the IUD had been prematurely released from its packaging, there is no way they could insert it into her effectively. After some time, Diddy heeded the advice of KK and removed the syringe from her and handed it to KK. KK and Jane Doe then exited defendant Shane's residence, leaving plaintiff alone with Diddy, Shane, and Doe's 1 and 2. Diddy then picked up a television remote that was near Plaintiff and violently inserted it into Plaintiff and her private area. Diddy was violently doing this to Plaintiff while with a television remote, told Plaintiff that her life was in his hands and that if he wanted to, he could take her and she would never be seen again. Plaintiff began hysterically crying from the threats by Diddy, along with the pain of being violently pushed in with the remote, as well as lingering pain from the ordeal and the IUD syringe insertion. Diddy then instructed defendant Shane to turn Plaintiff on her stomach, seemingly tired of hearing her blood-curdling cries. Shane then grabbed the Plaintiff by her abdomen and hips and turned Plaintiff on her stomach. Diddy then instructed defendant Shane to put a pillow over her head because he didn't want to see her face or hear her cries, and defendant Shane to R her from the back. Shane did what Diddy was told and began to, penetrate her from behind. Diddy then violently did it as well after Shane followed him, and then defendants Diddy and Shane took turns doing that in the back. Plaintiff then exited. It's just a lot, guys. Defendant Doe 2 raped Plaintiff and then exited Shane's residence. Diddy then instructed defendant Doe to also rape Plaintiff. Instead of immediately doing that, defendant Doe doused Plaintiff with more oil lubricant, then jumped on top, naked, oil body, treating it like a slip and slide, knocking the wind out due to the enormous size. And again, I'm sorry, we warned you, trigger warning, it's going to continue.
Yeah.
This is a very intense
really bad.
part of the document. Doe then caught himself from sliding over her oiled body and off the bed. He began then doing it the other way. Front, not in the back. Defendant was doing this to the Plaintiff. Diddy sat in the chair near the bed and began enjoying it himself while recording it on tape. Another party's phone fell on the bed near Plaintiff, then attempted to grab the phone, but it slipped out of her hands and onto the floor due to the oil that had been doused all over her body. Defendant Diddy began laughing at her attempt to grab the phone. Throughout this violent ganging, defendant Diddy made constant belittling remarks, including that he owned her now. The body was becoming more and more limp over the course of this until eventually she had no control and she could not move her body. After Doe finished, KK entered the room to examine the condition of Plaintiff, who was barely able to move or control her bodily functions. KK examined Plaintiff to see if she needed assistance and was about to give Plaintiff an IV fluid. Plaintiff cannot be certain if she did or did not receive that, but KK then opened a different bag, different than the one removed the oil from, where Plaintiff observed several medication bottles, IV fluid bags, and unidentifiable powder substances. She pulled a pill from one of the medicine bottles and gave it to Diddy. Diddy then inserted the pill into Plaintiff's mouth and down her throat to where Plaintiff had no choice but to ingest the unknown pill. Shane, Diddy, KK, and Doe 1 then exited the residence to the backyard where they smoked marijuana and cigarettes. Plaintiff remained in an almost lifeless state in defendant Shane's bedroom until she finally regained her bodily functions. Plaintiff began looking for her clothes, her purse, and that contained her car keys and cell phone, but she could not discover them in the room or anywhere in the apartment. Plaintiff was only able to find a t-shirt on the floor, which she put on her body. Plaintiff also observed a black condom wrapper on the floor of the bedroom, which she assumed was used by the defendants, most likely Diddy. Plaintiff then grabbed the knife from the kitchen and headed to the backyard where the defendants were smoking, as that was the only way to exit the premises onto the street. Plaintiff concealed the knife on her left side as she exited the apartment in the backyard. Upon coming to the exit of the home, which led to the backyard, Plaintiff was met with Doe 1, who was standing at the door between the residence and the backyard. By the time Plaintiff was able to compose herself and come to the backyard, KK was no longer in the yard but upstairs on the patio balcony with defendant Jane Doe. Defendant Doe allowed Plaintiff to walk to the backyard where Shane and Diddy were still smoking. Doe did not see the knife that Plaintiff concealed on her left as it was obstructed by the oversized t-shirt. Diddy still partially nude from the assault, while defendants Shane and Doe had clothing. Shane then left the upstairs portion of the patio where KK and Jane Doe already situated. Plaintiff then sat down on a makeshift seat in the backyard when defendant Diddy noticed her presence and remarked that he was surprised she was still able to walk because he had given her enough drugs to take out a horse. Plaintiff then asked Diddy what he gave her, and he laughed and did not provide a response. Diddy then made further comments to Plaintiff in a jovial, friendly manner, asking why they hadn't partied together before because it was so much fun, and he hadn't had any ass that tight in a while. Doe then quipped at Diddy that he probably hadn't had any ass that tight because he's not used to having it with women, which defendant Diddy and Doe 1 laughed at. Plaintiff then told Diddy she did not party with him and she did not enjoy partying with him and that he raped her. Diddy did not like plaintiff's response to the lighthearted commentary and offered plaintiff money and instructed plaintiff to say that it was all consensual and that plaintiff was a sex worker. Plaintiff became enraged and yelled at Diddy that it was not consensual, that she was not a sex worker, and she refused to take any money from him and would tell the police that he had raped her. Defendant Diddy then told plaintiff that no one would ever believe that, and if she did tell anyone, that they would harm her family. Doe then showed plaintiff his phone, which looked as if it was outside of the plaintiff's estranged sister's residence, as she could see her sister sitting on the couch and her sister's spouse on the balcony. It looked as if someone was outside the residence streaming this video to defendant Doe's phone. This is literally like something out of a movie, Kim. It's just wild.
That's wild.
That he's just sitting there with a live stream of his sister, or I guess a video clip potentially. And they went and did all that, figured out who it was. It's a lot to digest here. Plaintiff was rattled by what she was seeing, was still angry about the gang R-ing, and still not complying with Diddy's request to take the money being offered to say that it was consensual. Diddy then called his mother in an effort to further convince plaintiff not to report the assault. So again, as if it wasn't strange enough, now Diddy calls his mom. Diddy's mother yells at plaintiff to not hurt her son. Like, what? There's a lot in between. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's super confusing. Plaintiff told defendant Diddy's mom that her son had violently raped plaintiff. Diddy's mother, seemingly unfazed by the statement, then continued her demands with plaintiff to take the money being offered and not report to law enforcement. Defendant Diddy then made further threats that he had gotten off from bigger crimes than this and referred to Tupac again, further antagonizing plaintiff. It's a lot, man. Defendant Doe then turned to defendant Diddy and pulled his gun on him, asking him to repeat what he said in reference to Tupac. As the two of them were exchanging words, plaintiff went back behind defendant 1, where seemingly began to protect plaintiff. Sorry. One of the John Does suddenly is offended and said, "You what? You killed Tupac?" and then pulls a gun on him. Did I read that correct, Kim?
Yep.
So there's suddenly now, after they all violently did this to the woman, now suddenly that one of them gets mad saying, "Wait, what? You killed Tupac?" Then protects the plaintiff. Like, okay. As the two of them were exchanging words, plaintiff went behind defendant, where he seemingly began to protect plaintiff. Defendant Doe then advanced on Diddy, questioning him over the comments he made about Tupac. During this commotion, a neighbor directly across the street came outside and peered into the backyard and asked what all the commotion was about. So now, I didn't know that. Now a neighbor witness is there seeing this go down. I would imagine heard some of this. Defendant Doe then pointed the gun at the neighbor and instructed him to mind his business and return to his residence. Now, very easy to track down this neighbor, knowing the address, where it was, who, even if he moved, they could go back and find him. Will this neighbor provide testimony? Because you'd think that would be incredibly important. And why would they put this in there if they didn't? So interesting. They paid him off, I guess, is what they're going to try to say if he says nothing. Defendant Doe then turned the gun back on defendant Diddy. Plaintiff, not far behind Doe, tried to grab defendant Doe's hand that had the gun. The gun then went off and hit a hill behind defendant Shane's residence. So a gun goes off and the cops still aren't called. Okay. Defendant Diddy then ran up to the back stone stairs near the hill in the backyard towards where defendants KK, Shane, and John Doe were. Plaintiff charged toward Diddy, moving the concealed knife from her left hand to her right in pursuit of defendant Diddy. Again, it feels like they wrote this to be a movie scene in the Diddy movie, Kim. Plaintiff, it's a lot of action details. Plaintiff then pushed defendant Diddy from behind while on the stone stairs outside, causing him to fall with his back towards plaintiff. Plaintiff then raised the knife in a rage from the events just transpired and with the intent of driving the knife into Diddy's back when he turned around and began pleading for his life. Plaintiff, shocked now to see Diddy acting as a victim, had a moment of clarity and then turned and ran down the outdoor stone staircase back out to the backyard. Stab him, dude! Stab him. Then we'd have more evidence, right? And a wound and a lot more stuff to back the case up. But I guess she ran away at that point. Diddy then chased the plaintiff down the stairs as expected, attempted to push her, but she already was at the bottom, gained her footing, and wielded the knife at Diddy, grazing his abdomen. So she then, I guess, does stab him or grazes him. Hearing the commotion, defendants KK, Jane Doe emerged. Defendant KK began administering first aid to defendant Diddy for the injuries. Plaintiff tried to make a quick dash for the exit, but was thwarted by defendant Doe. After a period of time, plaintiff was able to assign from defendant Doe due to first aid commotion with Diddy and was able to run down the street. Once made it to the street, she began yelling loudly for someone to call the police. So again, as alluded in the beginning, you'd think someone would have heard this. If the neighbor next door heard it, someone would be witnessing, I hope, to confirm this. Defendant Doe, who had now caught up with plaintiff, advised plaintiff that he was an undercover cop. To this day, plaintiff unsure of the truth or falsity of that statement. What? So Donnie Brasco's in this, Kim, now as well?
I don't know. I don't know.
I know, guys, we want to say Diddy's guilty, but if this was any other lawsuit, I ask you this, would you have red flags going off? Because mine are. I got to just be honest. Now, there's a lot of stuff here to prove that this could be true, in which case,
yes.
Fuck. If it's true, like, holy fuck. We're in the uncensored portion of the show. But if it's true, like, my God. But it's so much that I can't just accept it all. This is insane. This is insane. Now, again, I'm not saying it's false, but I'm also not saying it's true. I don't know what to believe. This is just so much. Because on top of his mom's called, all this Tupac stuff, the neighbors shot at, now there's an undercover cop who's like, yo, I'm undercover. Now, again, could be lying, I guess, if it were more realistic, try to put her at ease. But this is wild. So anyway, the same neighbor then again emerges from the residence asking what's transpired. Just as plaintiff was attempting to answer, gunshots began being fired off in plaintiff's direction. And at the neighbor, mind you. The neighbor's not calling the cops on this? Plaintiff fled in a car near where the neighbor was also taking cover, lost sight of defendant Doe. Plaintiff then heads into a SUV, screeching and speeding levels of the residents. Plaintiff then entered the home of the neighbor who informed her that he had already called the police. Okay, so the police was called by the neighbor. Okay, thank you. There was a lot to catch up here. I haven't read it in specific. That's why I wanted to read it with you guys. I'm going to put a poll in there because I'm curious. Are you believing this? Now that we've gotten a little deeper in, I'm just curious. We may do it a couple times. I want to see where you guys, where your heads are at as you're reading all this, because it's a lot. It's a lot. Mm-hmm. Plaintiff informs the neighbor that she was at Sean Combs. It was Sean Combs who raped her and shot them, but the neighbor was unaware who defendant Diddy was. But he should still be able to testify that she was there and said this, in which case then we'd have some proof and some witnesses. Shortly thereafter, a sheriff from the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department arrived at the neighbor's home. So there should be a record of this, Kim, right? Yep. Whether they ignored it or what have you, this should be, and then, okay, we got something. Plaintiff told the sheriff she had been violently gang-ard by defendant Diddy and others, and that she did not have her clothes, phone, purse, keys, or cell. Now, again, at this, we'll see if it gets there. Sorry, I'm offering commentaries to read it because I want to not forget this stuff. At this point, wouldn't they do a rape kit, Kim? You'd think?
It depends.
Does that not always happen?
It is up to the victim, I believe, and a lot of people are not as educated in what all happens with a kit. It's very, very difficult. It's very traumatizing. It can be very painful, is my understanding. And I've heard of cases where people have gone to the hospital to go have it done, and they are so terrified and paralyzed, and their trauma responses are so off the charts, they can't get out of the vehicle to even have it be done. So it's kind of one of those things people assume that it's just, oh, just go get a kit done, but it's not that simple. It's not that simple.
Noted. Okay. And I saw a comment and it's fair. I put an unsure and I just canceled the other one and we just put it unsure. Mm-hmm. So yes, no, unsure. The previous poll was 72% of you said yes. About 70% yes, 30% said no. But I've added now an unsure to see if that adjusts you guys where you're in, because that's where I'm at. I guess that's a fair point. I don't know what to believe typically. And that's where we all should be at because it should be figured out in the court of law. But I'm curious how many of you are just accepting all this, how many of you are saying, no, this seems too far-fetched, and how many of you are sort of like, this is a lot, I'm unsure. We'll see where the poll ends out. Okay, but so unclear if there was a rape kit. We'll see if it's mentioned. They received several noise complaints prior to the neighbor's call, instructed plaintiff to find a way to get home. Sheriff did not offer to take plaintiff home, nor did he call for emergency services, including an ambulance, nor any offer to take plaintiff to the hospital, nor any offer to help plaintiff recover her clothes or effects from defendant Shane's house. This is strange. This to me is the biggest red flag of just like, wait, what? Why wouldn't the sheriff done any of that? Do we have record of the sheriff even going there? You'd think those police records would all still be filed. If he showed up, he has to file it, correct? And there's a neighbor witness. There's gunshots. She's not wearing her clothes. This is confusing to me. The neighbor offered to let plaintiff sleep on his couch until she figured out a way to get her possessions and get home, but plaintiff declined and only remained at the neighbor's residence for a short period of time once the sheriff left. Super fucked up. The sheriff would do that. We need to know who the sheriff is and what happened there, because that's a huge question mark for me. Plaintiff then went back to defendant Shane's residence, where she found the door open and her clothes were readily available. She went back to the house?
Yes.
By herself?
Yes.
Shane then emerged as if nothing had transpired and offered for plaintiff to stay at his residence while she slept it off. What? Why would you go back to the house? I don't mean to victim blame, but holy shit, they literally just gang raped you, shot at you, attempted to stab and make you disappear, and you needed your clothes? Plaintiff asked for her purse and keys, but defendant Shane told her she shouldn't leave in her condition. Plaintiff, catatonic and in a state of shock, disbelief of the events, stayed at defendant's home while Shane left the house. What? What? Okay. Sorry,
okay.
That's a big, I didn't know that part. That's a huge fucking weird part of the puzzle.
Can I have the floor for a second?
Please. I know like I can't.
Okay.
Victims act differently in situations, but I'm sorry. She's written this story as immense fear and now is going to stay where the fear was. That's a hard thing for people to accept, Sam. So please explain.
I understand that. I think it is hard, but this is also where we have to remember how many people get into relationships that are abusive and they continue to go back, right? Like we've talked at length about DV on this channel and how many times on average it takes for someone to find the strength to leave the relationship. There's a lot of, I think there's a few things we have to consider when we look at this case. The first is that she has an enormous amount of substances in her system, right?
Right.
Andy, if you're following what I'm saying.
Not to interrupt you, but just to add to that, then why does she remember all the details? To me, that if you're going to make that argument, then she's remembering a lot of fucking details, and she shouldn't if she was so drugged, correct?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It depends if she blacked out or not. Clearly, she did not. What I think is very interesting about this situation is that, as Diddy allegedly said in this lawsuit, he couldn't believe she was standing because of how many substances she had been given. Her body, if this is all true, is in a different state that is not a normal state. This is a state of survival. And like, for example, Andy, I don't know if I've actually told you this. Years ago, I was in a car crash. My car was totaled. I was T-boned, and it was on my side of the vehicle. So the car, literally, I saw the emblem come through the door, and it hit my arm, and I went over. My father was driving. When I came to after the crash, there was a lot of what I believed at the time was smoke. I think it was coming off of the airbags, but I was in a state where I thought this car is going to blow up. And so my right leg and my right arm were out of commission. My dad was in the front seat. He's not properly conscious. And I'm going, we're both going to blow. So I, with one arm and one leg, got my seatbelt off, grabbed him from the front seat, got into the back seat, kicked the door off the car, fully kicked it off the car, and then dragged my dad out of the vehicle. One arm, one leg. And this is the thing. When people end up in these situations with their survival, they are capable of doing things that we don't think are even humanly possible. Now, as soon as I got out of that vehicle, I walked down the street a little bit away from the crash and I passed out. And I don't remember much until I ended up back at the hospital. But my point is that she had so many substances, so much adrenaline, so much cortisol. She's standing when she should not be standing. She should be blacked out, but she's not. And then she grabs a weapon and defends herself. This is possible. It's just extremely rare. And I cannot imagine how pushed to the brink this woman was. Now, at that point, you can go through that stage and then you get to the end of it. That doesn't mean that you're going to be thinking properly after that fact. Once I was in the hospital, my brain was resetting every 15 seconds and I couldn't remember what I had said. So when she goes back to the apartment, she's not thinking straight, right? Because she's gone through this incredibly traumatic event. And I mean, obviously there's going to be way more context and way much information, but way much more information. But it's really hard to make a judgment, and it's really easy to sit back and be like, oh, but there's no way that that makes sense. And you're right. It doesn't make sense. But in these types of situations, it can, and it varies by person. But the biggest thing that I was so stuck on, like reading this, was just the idea that the fact that she was able to get up is insane. It's insane.
Well, and that's
not
the beauty
impossible.
This is the beauty of what the show is. Like, Kim has her perspective, I have mine, and so will a jury. A jury's going to look at this and challenge it like I am. And people are calling me an ass for trying to be objective and looking at the point. But you guys, people are going to ask these fucking questions. In fact, Ashley Banfield does it on News Nation, 100%. And we're going to watch that clip in a little bit. So I'm not being an ass for challenging some of this. This is a lawsuit. This isn't a Cassie video. This is a lawsuit. And sadly, people over-exaggerate. We've seen it happen countless times through Amber Heard and others. Like, sadly, people will take it all the way. I've had it happen to me. It's part of the reason why I look at things more objectively than most. And it doesn't mean I'm trying to victim blame. No. And I'm appreciative of Kim talking that through me because it's interesting. I see some chat like saying Kim's crazy and I'm right. That's not fair either. We should hear each other out. We have to hear what the situation is. But I feel confident in saying, I will say this, that I'm not the only one who's going to ask questions like this and go, what the fuck, you went back after all that? Granted, I understand that it can happen. It absolutely can happen between trauma, adrenaline, and what we don't know what she was on. I accept it's possible, but for many, it's going to be far-fetched. And you guys got to understand that, and we got to make sure that the neighbor or the cops or some other people can help back this up because it's a lot. It's a lot. Not only just the extreme of going back, but the pieces and that remembered prior, the details. It's a lot to sort of just digest. So that's why this one's a little bit more insane for me and why I'm not so quick to just accept this one, because this one's fucking intense. I've never seen it. Like, I guess it's not true. We've seen Diddy treat women like this in the hallway of the Cassie video. Like, this is how Diddy treats people. We know that's factual. So the truth is, it's not that far-fetched that Diddy would be this violent with people at a home when he's just trying to have his way. I do believe he was forcing himself on people. I do. We haven't proven that yet, but there does seem to be enough valid testimony that makes me think this is legit, right? And we've seen how he treated Cassie in private, but not even private, with neighbors potentially in that hotel that could have witnessed it. He didn't give a shit about how he acted. So to be fair, yeah, it's not that far-fetched that he would behave like this with others. And this is kind of a combination of the freak-offs / Cassie, where we're getting an example of the extremity that potentially he was capable of. Like I said, if it's true, fuck, because this is heavy, this is hard, and maybe that's part of the reason why I'm being a sort of defensive too, and that like sometimes it's hard for me to accept such horror, Kim. Do you know what I mean? That someone is capable of this level of not only just abuse, but like control and just psychopathy. I don't know what the proper word is, but it's a fucking lot. So we're looking at this. We're dealing with it as we can. Go ahead, Kim. Go ahead.
I want to say too, because I am seeing you guys in the chat. That's fine if you think I'm crazy. That's fine with me.
They think I'm crazy too, Kim.
I was there, and
we're both getting it today.
In that specific situation, there were witnesses. I'm sorry, it is what it is. And if you really look into it, you can see there's a lot of cases in human history and with people where we are capable of doing insane things when we are in survival mode. Um, Now, all of you guys that are yelling at Andy, like I just saw Bonita, start listening to women, Andy. What am I? There I have a microphone here. I am on this stream, and I know part of the reason I am is because Andy values my opinion and what my perspective brings. He is listening. And part of what we have to do as people who have been through this is we have to be able to talk about it and explain things to people. And you have to be prepared that people are going to ask questions. And some of those questions may seem offensive at face value, but they're not trying to be. They're just trying to understand. Right? Like, and Andy, you've never told me to shut up or that I'm crazy or that I shouldn't talk about things or whatever. That's not the situation. You know what I mean?
Nor would I
So,
ever.
no, no. And I learned from you, you learn from me. We have to have these conversations, and I think it's a good thing to have. I think the biggest thing that with this case that I have to take a look at is we potentially have witnesses, we potentially have police reports, we
Yes.
potentially may have a video, right? Because it was being recorded. All this stuff comes out in court.
I'll be the skeptical, Kim. If they have the video and they have it, you don't hire Ariel. I'm sorry. I just don't think out of all the lawyers and feds and people associated with this, she gives me massive red flags. So that's the other reason I'm skeptical, and we'll get to these clips in a minute, but just to add why, you all can call me crazy or whatever. I'm always going to be skeptical. That's part of what I think the beauty of our channel and the show is the fact that I do try to look at it all from all perspectives because we have to. Because while I think Diddy's a monster and capable of these things, I do. He's innocent till proven guilty, guys. If we try to make him guilty in the court of social media, well, that's fucked up. That's not how it's supposed to work. It's happened to me. It's happened to Johnny Depp. It's happened to others. We got to make sure if he's guilty, he's actually proven guilty in a court of law. So then we can all say, see, told you so, piss off forever. And that's what's important here. So this is a lawsuit from a lawyer who I have a lot of issues with that I'm just like, she seems more about the clout chase than the truth. That's just me. And this whole thing, it does read a little bit like a Diddy fanfic. I'm not going to lie. I'll say it again. Everything we've heard is sort of in here, and conveniently in a way that I haven't ever seen it all combined like this. Now, this is either the first of its kind, in which case, like I said, holy shit, this is insane. This is crazy. This is horrific. Or it's somebody over exaggerating some certain details to get the lawsuit through. You guys got to accept that too. That is absolutely a possibility here. And we have to look at it from all sides and be fair and look at it objectively. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm not saying she's lying. I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't know what happened here. If this actually happened, then holy crap, shame on him. And I don't even know what the punishment is for somebody like this, because the level of crazy and criminal and it's a lot. But there's still more. It's not over, guys. Let's keep reading this. I'm a little floored, and that's why we took a pause, because again, she stayed there. Someone made a good comment, Kim, as well, just to point out and defend you. Cassie came back as well. It happens a lot, and it's a valid point.
That's what I mean with DV, right? How many times on average does it take for someone in a domestic violence relationship to leave the relationship? I've heard upwards of 7 times.
Right, and then he lied about it and got caught. So yep. It is possible. I've never said this is impossible. I just said it's a lot. This is a lot. It's the first time we've seen it all converge like this. Diddy's mom's on the phone, aware and sort of telling her to shut the fuck up. Like, Tupac's involved. Everything. I feel like the only videotapes, everything has been mentioned in this case. This is like the greatest hits of all the most horrific Diddy stories in one case that you'd think the feds would be all over this. They would be all this case would put him away forever, Kim. That's part of, I guess, my other issue is this, and we don't know if this is part of the criminal investigation, but when I see that she's representing them, I'm like, really? Is this? And please be fair, Kim. If you were a legitimate victim of Diddy, would she be the lawyer you'd call first, given what you've learned so far about her?
I would be nervous at this point. Yes, I would definitely say that. I think, though, just something you kind of alluded to there, Andy, and I think it's a really important point to discuss about this, is that for you, like you hear this and you just think it's so horrific. How is it not possible that the cops wouldn't be involved, that the people wouldn't be taking action? How could you see this and not do anything? And the thing is, that is essentially, Andy, your worldview. That if something like this happens, that's how people react. And usually that's because that's how you would react, right? If you saw someone running down the street with nothing but a t-shirt on and a knife screaming like crazy, your first instinct would be, I'm calling the cops. And you would be like, she's going to the hospital. She is getting the care that she needs. I'm going to get her some water while she's sitting in my house, and I'm going to take care of her and do the decent thing as a human being. What happens in these situations is you have to understand that a lot of these people are not that way. They don't think the way that you and I think. And they don't think that way because of really, really messed up stuff, right? And sometimes there's bigger situations going on. For all we know, maybe there is federal involvement in this. I have no idea, and I'm not alleging that. I'm just saying that this could be very complicated and could take on many levels. And people are going to react to things in different ways because that means they have to confront the possibility that maybe people aren't the way that we thought they were at points.
Yeah, let's get through it. There's still a lot. We're gonna watch these clips. Like I said, this is a long show. This is a full uncensored. You're getting the full experience. You're getting our commentary. You're getting the full lawsuit, and then we're gonna go through the interviews with this lawyer. And when we get through it all, I'm gonna do the poll again, and we're gonna see if you all still have the same confidence level that you did at the start of this, because that's why I'm a little skeptical on this more than others. And I think a lot of you want to just accept this because Diddy is a monster. And he's clearly capable, given what we saw just on that video alone. But I'm going to continue to look at it objectively. So let's continue. Here we go. And again, this was the biggest red flag to me is still this. But I accept, and I hear Kim, and I hear you come back. This is a little different. Like Cassie was in a relationship. She was absolutely gaslit and sort of groomed into the abuse, I feel like, and the relationship of Diddy. Whereas this person is kind of a stranger to him and never liked him. That's why I feel like this is slightly different, that she would go back to the place where the shots are being fired. It's a lot to accept for me. It's not like, oh, I'm abused and I'm going back to my abuser. This dude's a random guy who assaults her, who she makes clear in the record she never liked. And then she goes back to potentially face him again. It's a lot for me, Kim. So, and I think it's going to be a lot for a jury and others. And whether you're mad at me for saying it, sorry, that's, I think, a reality that we got to say. Now, if there's the neighbor and the cop report and things that can come forward to prove it, then more power to it. And I will be here to defend her all day long. But this is going to be an uphill battle without without those witnesses, I suspect. But let's keep reading. Later that morning, defendant Shane returned to the residence and woke plaintiff up, gave her back her purse, cell phone, keys, and plaintiff left defendant's residence. In a daze, plaintiff returned home, tried to make sense out of what happened to her. She contacted her primary care doctor and asked for an HIV STD test in fear of possibly contracting disease. Plaintiff tried to continue her life as she felt she wouldn't be believed, as plaintiff had already told Contra Costa Sheriff's defendant that Diddy did this, and to no avail. Further, plaintiff was under impression that if she did continue to say Diddy's name and relation, that she would not be believed and her family would be in danger. Now, this is a valid reason. This is a valid reason. Why didn't she do anything? Why didn't she go get the kit? Why didn't she tell more? This is a reason. I can't deny it. Fear and everything else is real. And I know women, friends of mine, who have had this experience, not this intense, but have been raped and never told anybody. They never want to tell it. They don't want to relive it, let alone go to the cops and have to go through the experience of a trial. That is absolutely common. Sadly, it's horrifyingly scary, but it's a reason. Seemingly mere days, but maybe even the day before plaintiff's rape, Shane had miraculously began driving a new car. Plaintiff believes this was payment by Diddy for setting up plaintiff to be raped. A few weeks later, in April 2018, plaintiff, still in pain and reeling from the horrific event, went to the hospital as her injuries had not subsided from it. Hospital conducted several tests on plaintiff, including a rape kit, ultrasound, x-rays. Additionally, plaintiff was given IV fluids to stabilize her vitals, as she was in a severe weakened state from being unable to eat, losing a substantial amount of weight since then. While in the hospital, plaintiff told members of her treatment team about her horrific assault. They then contacted Walnut Police. So there we go. So she did say it. Eventually, she had to say it again. This is encouraging to the truth, because then not only are there medical records, there are now another police report from the Walnut Creek Police. Walnut Creek showed up to plaintiff's hospital room and took a statement regarding it. So there's 2 police records, you'd think. Plaintiff had already told Contra Sheriff about it, and then it was Diddy who orchestrated it on May 23rd, 2018, which was ignored. Plaintiff declined to refer to Diddy again. So she didn't mention it was Diddy. No. She told Contra that about it. Okay, but declined to refer to Diddy again to Walnut because she believed she would be ignored by the Walnut Creek just as the way she was and further harmed by Diddy. So she mentioned that she was hard, but not that it was Diddy. Yeah. But still, there should be a police record here to help confirm that at least. She was worried she'd be further harmed by Diddy if he discovered she named him to the police. Plaintiff only told Walnut Creek police about the assault from defendants Shane and Doe too. Okay, so she did mention the other people. Plaintiff believes her statements made to Walnut Creek while at the hospital were captured by police body cam footage. Interesting. Plaintiff further believes her statements made to, and this was 2018, so it's not that far ago. These should still be on record. I don't know how long they keep body cam footage, but plaintiff further believes her statements made to the Contra Costa Sheriff on March 23rd, immediately after the vicious assault, where plaintiff named defendant Diddy directly and by name, was captured by body. Okay, so she also believes that the original Diddy one was also captured on body cam footage. Now, I can give that, that doesn't give me a red flag that she didn't name Diddy the second time. Some will say, well, she changed her story.
No.
I totally get the fear there. Totally get why she wouldn't want to go there. So that's, again, if this is on body camera footage or at least police records, that's going to be damning for Diddy. Plaintiff also filed a report to the Orlinda Police Department, but again was too afraid to name Diddy as one of her assailants. During this report, plaintiff provided her clothing to the police from the night of the assault, and they only retained her underwear. To date, the underwear was never returned, and plaintiff believes no investigation was ever commenced. Interesting. Again, sue these police departments? Maybe. Plaintiff sought assistance from therapists in May, one of which tried to have her therapy appointments covered by a victim's compensation fund, which was rejected because plaintiff was told no law enforcement agency had opened an active investigation into her many reports of her gang rape. Jesus. So we have if there's again records of the therapist, that's going to be conclusive. Thereafter, plaintiff asked police for a copy of a report from the Walnut Creek Department. Plaintiff was provided a letter from Walnut Creek stating that it was unable to furnish this information as it is confidential and not subject to public release. She couldn't get her own file?
Nope. There's cover up.
Okay, well, things are now
there we go.
Seeming less suspicious if all of this is provable. In March 2024, plaintiff was re-traumatized by all the events surrounding defendant Diddy, including several civil complaints filed against him as well of the raids. Plaintiff called Contra County Sheriff again in hopes of renewing her previous complaint and amending it to ensure Diddy's name was included. Plaintiff received no response from Sheriff. Plaintiff in July 2024 then emailed the chief of the sheriff's office regarding her complaint and lack of investigation, how she was treated by the initial responding officer. Plaintiff then received a call back from a detective, but nothing further. Plaintiff then began seeking legal counsel for her claims, ultimately being referred to an undersigned for representation. Undersigned counsel also attempted to get a copy of the police report from Contra County, but was told they would not provide a report or any further information without a subpoena. Well, let's get that damn subpoena.
There we go.
So, all right, there it is. So that's the details. The rest of this is all just sort of the legalities of things, correct?
Yeah.
The
specific claims.
This is just sort of the broader problem with the Diddy and the control and the cover-ups, the complicit nature. Cassie, they're bringing up sort of everything again now. Second cause of action, violent racket. So these are all the... Okay. These are all going to be the specific charges. Which are they listed up here? They're not. But so these are the specific charges now that they're facing, hoping he'll face. Okay. We don't have to go into all that detail again as we've... False imprisonment because she was in the room. You guys get the gist. Horrific stuff.
Yep.
Trafficking, enforcement of the victim protection. Okay, so these are all the charges. Seventh cause, knowing beneficiary of a sex trafficking venture because they were trying to sell her. Yeah. So this is basically taking all the story and now they're putting in together the causes. All right, look, it's a lot. It's a lot. Now, there, especially by the end there's a lot that can confirm this, or at least add some stuff that's going to be hard for Diddy's team to ignore. Body cams, police reports, when they get those subpoenas, as well as the neighbor testimony, which you'd think they'd be able to go get or force him to comply. Now, he may not due to fear of himself, but there were clearly witnesses and officers, Kim, that should corroborate this, that would absolutely help. Without that, do you concur this is going to be a hard one for her to win?
I think if she doesn't have the evidence, it's going to be hard. But from the sounds of it, I think she's got it. I think she's got it. I can't look at knowing that there is the medical. You know, like the kits were done. The kit was done. There were ultrasounds. There was all that type of stuff done. We've got multiple police departments involved. We have witnesses. We have a tape, allegedly, potentially. I mean, if you see all of that, how can you not believe her? I understand the concern of the attorney. And again, like, we welcome this attorney to fill in the blanks for us, because we've got some questions regarding, you know, what she said about the tapes and everything else. But I really don't think that this is kind of one of these cases that is so crazy. I don't know why you would want to admit this if it wasn't true. It's kind of the same vibe I'm getting with what I got with Cassie, in all honesty. So it's a lot. It's a lot.
Let's watch the interview because we got a lot of clips here. Let's see how Ashley Banfield sort of challenges Ariel in this. Let's watch these clips.
Flashing red warning here. What I'm about to say is quite disturbing. There's a lot of like uncomfortable language. And if you are triggered or upset by sex assaults and violent assaults, etc., then this is definitely not the show for you tonight. The accuser is named Ashley Parham, and she has agreed to allow her name to be made public. Let's be real clear about that. She is going public with her name. She says that in February of 2018, she met a man named Shane Pierce at a bar, and that Shane FaceTimed Diddy outside on the sidewalk, apparently trying to impress her. But Ashley Parham says that she told both Shane and Diddy on FaceTime that she wasn't impressed. And this is important. She says she believed that Diddy had something to do with the murder of Tupac Shakur, and said as much. Allegedly, Diddy warned her that she would pay for saying something like that. So let's just fast forward now to a month later, where she says this guy Shane invited her to come to his apartment. And the lawsuit says, quote, plaintiff and defendant Shane then began to watch a movie, and defendant Shane offered her a glass of water, which he retrieved and brought back to the plaintiff. A few minutes later, Ashley Parham says that P. Diddy showed up with an entourage, including his top aide, Christina Coram, an unnamed woman who is not a defendant in the suit, and 3 unnamed men, one of whom she says was Diddy's driver, and Parham says that that driver waited outside throughout the whole of what I'm about to tell you. Parham says that Diddy was antagonistic from the start, and that he put a knife to her face.
I don't need her recap.
By defendant, it had AK.
Where does the lawyer come in? She's just gonna,
as well as the lingering
just
face or
read all this.
Then defendant.
And don't forget to
I think
click
it is
the red
just a
subscribe
summary.
button.
Okay, this one's just a summary. So sorry, I don't need to watch a 7-minute summary.
They are jaw-dropping allegations. A woman says she was gang raped by P. Diddy and his entourage, and drugged as well more than 6 years ago in California. Ashley Parham says the terrifying evening involved a knife fight with friends. There's no once again by the accuser's attorney, Ariel Mitchell. Ariel, you're just great to stay with me over 3 blocks. I really appreciate this. Friend of the show, too, I might add. So when I'm tough as a journalist, it's certainly not personal. You know that.
She just stayed, first of all, huge red flags. I have to pause even before we get, she just stayed for 3 blocks. Okay. And then friend of the show, you're a friend of the show. Yeah, she's been on this show a lot. It's just something to be aware of.
That is a huge question. And you know, you just know opposing counsel is going to come at you saying all these horrific things. Literally, she lived a movie, a horror movie. And then after the police leave down the block, she decides to go back to the apartment, let herself in, and then stayed the night. How do you explain that?
So first I want to tell you, you asked the question that I asked. I said to her the exact same thing. What made you go back? And I
How dare they ask the question? Everybody was calling me an ass. Look, her own lawyer asked it. Thank you. Both of them said the same question I had.
knew in my mind, because I've dealt with so many victims, they're really not thinking clearly. And she said, Ariel, I knew you would say that. I knew you would ask me, why did I go back? And she said, honestly, I don't even have a good explanation. All I know is I just really wasn't there. I had on a t-shirt. I was at some strange man's house, the neighbor's house that she didn't know. She just thought she could go get, she had no purse. She had no keys. She had no cell phone. What was she supposed to do? And she was like, I figured maybe since they left, I could at least go try and get my stuff back. And she said, honestly, I've asked myself that many a times. I know this is probably going to come up to everybody, like, because any person like you and me sitting here logically, not in that situation, not having experienced that, we can sit here and judge all day and say, well, I wouldn't have done that, or that doesn't make any sense. But none of us know what we would do until we were in a similar situation. So I've been in situations where I profess, oh, it's no way if I was in this situation, I wouldn't do X, Y, and Z. And then the minute I got in that situation, I did not do any of those things. So I do agree that that was a question. I do agree to a person who's like us, who's not dealing with that or has not experienced something like that. They would say, oh, I wouldn't have gone back. But what would you have done? You have no clothes. You have no means of getting anywhere, no purse. Your car's there, no car keys, no cell phone. And your help, the police, seemingly left you. What other option would
if it goes,
you have?
if it goes to a jury, it's a good question. If it goes to the jury, it's going to be the reasonable mind of each juror who would make that decision. Ariel, like I said, I'm super appreciative that you spent this much time and that you helped us sort of navigate through the complaint. And I look forward to, I think we're going to be talking a lot more as this continues to go through the courts, this one and others. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
She didn't, though. It was pretty quick. But then she comes back an hour later.
Third person to, so let's go back. He would be the third person to rape her. This is vaginal, not anal. And she decided not to name him. When she decided to keep Diddy out of these subsequent police reports because she feared that Diddy could have a grave effect on her life, she didn't mention Doe number. It's not in the complaint. I'm not sure if it's a mistake. In the complaint, she just talks about Shane and I believe KK, but doesn't mention Doe number one. It stood out to me because I thought Doe number one was the one who said he was an undercover cop, and no undercover cop would ever take part in a gang rape, you know?
I don't know if you know too many undercover cops, and they pretty much do anything when they are infiltrating a mob or a mafia. I'm sure you probably heard stories of other undercover cops who engaged in murder.
Okay, I'll give you that. Let's say he did. Ariel?
Wait, I'm not going to give her that. It's common for undercover cops to partake in gang rapes, Kim? Is that what I just heard?
Undercover cops will sometimes do whatever it takes to make sure they do not blow their cover.
Even a gang rape?
I've heard stories.
Okie dokie.
Yes.
I'll give you that. Okay, I'll give you that. Let's say this guy who identified himself as an undercover cop, and maybe he was and maybe he wasn't, did take part in the attack. Why didn't she name him to the subsequent policing agencies, the Walnut Creek, and then I'm trying to remember what the last one was. There was a third agency that she reported and decided to withhold Diddy's. Yeah, Orinda. She didn't name to Walnut Creek or Orinda Doe number one, but he was clearly in her complaint part of the rape.
So she didn't name anybody who was a part of Diddy's entourage. She didn't name KK. She didn't name the other Jane Doe. So she literally omitted everybody who was a part of Diddy's entourage who showed up that day, the getaway driver. So it doesn't not make sense to me. It makes complete sense. She omitted all of them out of the group. Because then to bring in
I'm going to read it for you. Ariel, sorry, I just found it again. Plaintiff only told Walnut Creek police about the assault from defendants Shane and Doe number two. That's from the complaint. I'm just taking her words and your words.
So She just got caught not even knowing her own fucking complaint, which is so embarrassing. That's such a bad look.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, which one did I say? I don't remember. Okay, that bad look, Ariel. But let's continue.
No, I'm not. I just said she omitted all of the individuals who showed up with Diddy. She omitted,
Except for John Doe 2 and Shane, who are still part of Diddy's crew. This argument makes no fucking sense.
defendant KK. She omitted the defendant who's listed as a Jane Doe, and she also omitted.
But they didn't
Diddy
rape her.
and Doe 1. Yes.
According to her, she was raped by Doe number 1, and she was not reported to the police, despite the fact that he was one of the rapists.
We're having a disconnect
According
right
to
here
her.
because I'm trying to explain to you. To me, it makes sense, and her explanation makes sense because she didn't mention anybody. She didn't mention anybody from Diddy's camp. She didn't mention Doe 1. She didn't mention Diddy. She didn't mention anybody.
No, she did.
To the police.
Your complaint 100% says, I'm reading your words, plaintiff told Walnut Creek police about the assault from defendants Shane and Doe number 2. But it doesn't mention Doe number 1. And I just don't know why. I understand why she's omitting Diddy if she fears reprisal, but no mention of Doe number 1.
So if you want me to bring you some insight, I'm trying to do that. Because to talk about Doe number 1 is to talk about Diddy. To talk about defendant KK is to talk about Diddy. To talk about the Jane Doe is to bring up Diddy. So it's no way she could bring up Doe number 1 without it leading back to Diddy in some way, shape, or form. So, because that was a person who came with Diddy.
She's like, this makes no fucking sense, but I'm just going to say, okay. This makes no fucking sense. So John Doe, Doe 2, not associated with Diddy. Doe 1 is. Does that make sense, Kim? They're all associated with Diddy, girl. What are you trying to... No, just because you're all confidently saying you know what you're explaining, you're not. It looks awful.
Who came to the park, who came to the house, ready to party.
And she mentions Doe number 2 and Shane. Okay, listen, I have one more big important question for you.
Ashley Benford's like, yeah, but she did mention 2 people from his crew. Okay, but anyway.
Ariel, and I'm very appreciative that and I have to ask hard questions because, you know, when there are so many accusations, I have to do this. And I'll tell you, I'm nothing compared to Diddy's lawyer. He's hiring his dream team, and you know that every, comma is going to get picked apart. When we come back, though, I do want to ask you about...
Wait, did she just roll her eye?
You know that every, comma is going to get picked apart. When we come back, though, I do want to ask you about this issue. After allegations...
That was epic. Did you see that eye roll?
I do want to ask you about this issue. Comma is going to get picked apart. When we come back, though, I do want to ask you about this
I'm trying to freeze it on there.
Picked apart. When we come back, though, I do want to ask...
That's a lot. That's a moment.
You about...
I'm trying to get I want a still of that.
We'll get it later. We'll get it. It's okay.
When we come back, so I do.
There it is.
Just wow.
That is some shit. She's like, fuck these guys. I'm not coming back to them again.
Yeah, a little bit.
I want to ask you about this issue. After allegations that she was gang raped and drugged, involved in a knife fight, had knifed Diddy, was shot at. Why did the accuser decide to go back to the scene of the actual crime that she... Thanks for watching. Go to join...
These edits are annoying.
That's
so
the
that's the one we watched first. I guess I try to get it for the times.
As a journalist, it's sleeve down the block.
Okay, it was. We watched them in backwards. I did the wrong. I looked at the times trying to... That was the one that followed it. So we watched her answer there. That was the next one. This was the first one. That was the second piece. Yeah, Kim. Well, I'm going to go back to the complaint because all the John Does are there. Why is John Doe 1 more connected to Diddy and John Doe 2 isn't? Does that make sense to you? Shane also not connected to Diddy, bought a new car, gets connected to Diddy. Like how are John Doe 2 and Shane part of Diddy but John Doe 1? Ashley asked a great question. Why isn't John Doe 1 listed if John Doe 2 and Shane are? Thoughts?
I find a lot of what Ariel says to be very, very confusing. And I'm trying to separate I'm trying to separate the plaintiff from the lawyer, right? Because I have questions about the way that this lawyer has chosen to to talk to the press, and some of the choices that she's made, I definitely have reservations. And I do find a lot of what she says to be very confusing. And I'm also kind of taken aback a bit by her reaction to being questioned, because that absolutely is going to happen. And Banfield is right. She is nothing compared to what her client, or what Ariel's client, will likely have to deal with in cross-examination or on trial. Um, it is concerning, but I also I think a lot of this stuff is going to become a lot clearer as evidence comes into play. And that's kind of where I sit. What are you trying to find?
Defendant 1 was seemingly began to protect plaintiff. So defendant 1 was the one who turned on Diddy, aiming at now I'm really confused. So defendant Doe 1 turns to Diddy with his bodyguard, mind you. This is defendant Doe 1, is his bodyguard. Turns to Diddy, pulls his gun on him, asking him to repeat what he said about Tupac. So the undercover cop bodyguard turns on Diddy, aims a gun at him. Two, they're exchanging word. If anybody's not on Diddy's team, it's actually Doe 1, because Doe 1 fucking holds a gun at him. Repeat himself. Diddy then the plaintiff hides behind Doe 1. Doe 1 then advances on Diddy. Why would an undercover cop aim his gun at Diddy, Kim? This makes no fucking sense. So you're going to go rape the person, but then you're going to pull a gun on him afterwards? Like, sorry, not lining up in my brain. And that's not victim blame. The story doesn't make fucking sense. Why would an undercover cop do anything, go literally get on with the oil and partake slipping around doing this abhorrent act to keep his cover, but then pull a gun on the guy he's trying to keep the cover with, Kim?
I have no idea. And the thing is, like, I feel like that's kind of one of those things where we need to get certain people on the stand for context, because there may be context that does make that make sense. I don't know.
This makes no fucking sense.